Hi guys, welcome to this tutorial. What I'm going to do is go through the content aware fill in Photoshop. So I have Photoshop loaded up. This is a photo I took when I was in the Philippines quite a while ago, and what I'm going to do is just get into it. So I'm switching from a background into a layer, and what I'm going to attempt to do is extract the tree and this foreground element from it. I'm creating a new layer so that you can see, so that I have an original behind it that's a clean version that I don't need to worry about. So yes, now I've created a layer, and what I'm going to do is effectively just extract this thing. So I'm going to use the object selection tool and the quick selection tool. As you can see, it just draw around what you want, and it does some calculating, does a little bit of working out, and works out kind of, is this the object that you want to be selected? No, it's not perfect, you know what I mean, but it does generally does a fairly good job if you've got something that stands out a bit like this. I've decided that I want all of the tree and actually all of the foreground layer is what I'm going to put together. So you can paint on using the quick selection tool, and if you hold down shift while you're doing it, it adds to the selection that you're doing, and if you hold down alt, it removes it. And you just need to roughly paint where you want, and it kind of tries to work out where the edges are. It can get a little bit tricky in areas, especially kind of down here where I have some foreground and background merging over each other. So I will need to go in and kind of, refine that element down. And again, it kind of like it adds to it, but it might add too much, so then you take a little bit out and then it comes back out again. So it can vary how it's doing. So let's have a closer look in here, and you can see, I'm not going to go in and get all of the details and everything, but you can see it's actually selected some of the land back there. So I'm just going to hold down alt and bring that back, and you can see just as I paint it out, it kind of finds the new area that it wants, which is the edge of this bank here. But I will want some of the trees that are part way down the bank that are sticking up, that are obviously not part of the background there, so I can then paint those back in again as well, using the plus to bring it back up until we find a good area where I'm happy with what's actually being selected. So I just kind of went around selecting all the leaves that were like sticking out, all the bits of grass and everything, trying to find a good area, get it all together. And so I'm just going to kind of go into fast motion here as I go around. But you can see some of the leaves are not selected and sticking out, and I just want to get as much as possible, but I'm not worried about it being like a perfectly fine mask in at the moment. I can go in and I can refine it later once I've separated out the layers, but this is just me kind of going around making sure that I've got a lot of the leaves that are sticking out, because the more of the leaves that are still in the background when you separate the foreground element from it, the harder it will be, and the more you'll have to manually do things. And here you can see it's selected a large section of sky, so I had to go in and then reduce back out from there. So once I've got pretty much everything selected, I'm going to do a layer via cut, and that will create a hole in the background and bring the foreground, creates a new layer of what I have selected, things in the background. So if I switch off the layer, if I switch off my background, my main background, if I switch off the layer that I worked on, you can see what was selected, and you can see there's a bit of the sky at the top that's actually that I didn't see that it had selected, but there's also a bit of the tree that hasn't been selected. So what I can do is I can actually undo the layer mask, and I can go in and I can adjust that thing at the top. So I'm going to bring this top back in so I get more of the sky in back close to the tree, and then I'm going to add that section in the middle of the tree that was missing, so that I've got that in my selection. And then what I'll do is I will cut my layer again, so another layer via cut, and then we have a look at it now, and we should be able to see, yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. I mean, it's not brilliantly refined, but I'm just trying to do it kind of quickly to show you what it is. So now that I have that selected as two separate layers, what we need to do is we need to go into the background layer. So I'm going to, switch off the foreground layer and just get into the background layer. So you can see there's a lot of, you can see through the branches and the sky and everything through there, that if I had time I'd go in and I'd pull a bit more of that detail out. But for the purposes of what I'm doing in this, it's fairly easy to do this. But as you can see where all the leaves and everything I threw in there, we're going to have to do some work on it. So I'm just going to use the magic wand and just select the area that I've chopped out, and just a quick click and it selects everything there. And then once we have all of that selected, this is the area that we're going to fill in with other information that's in there. So in the edit menu you have content aware fill, and when you go into here it opens up a separate kind of window that brings it in, and you can see you have different options. So here it's set to rectangle because of what I was doing previously, where it actually looks around and does things on the square. Good for if you're doing like a street or something like that, or a building or something like that. It's very linear. But I'm just going to put it onto auto, and I'm switching back to auto there, and let me just increase the sizes so you can get a bit of a bigger idea of what's going on. So the green sections, and this is the mask, that's what it's using to sample. It's looking at that and it's trying to fill in the gap with what is there. And what you can do is you can add and subtract from the areas that it's using. So as you can see, it's picking up all these little leaves that I didn't get from the original mask, and then it's using those, and it's kind of calculating those into the content aware fill. So I'm actually going to just paint those out of the selection. So I'm telling it, don't worry about these little leaves that are in the sky. We don't really care about you trying to like rebuild those things and put detail and everything in it. If I paint it out of the mask, it just makes it easier. It's just going to look at it all here. If there's any other leaves that are kind of sticking through and causing issue, but there isn't really that much. A couple of little ones, but nothing major. So I got most of the ones that are causing a problem sticking through there. Okay, so it's not looking too bad, but we might want to improve how it looks a bit here. So I'm just going to go in and adjust some of the fill settings so that it's a bit more aware of what's going on. And I've got like a rotation on it, which can help sometimes in things, but I mean, this is a landscape, so it's probably not going to work very well, because you want to keep the clouds kind of similar kind of direction to what they were and everything else. So I'll just turn that off. But one of the main things is that we'll need to expand the selection area, because obviously we still have these bits that are sticking through, but it's really just about getting rid of those dark edges and everything in it. So as you go into the lasso tool, you could draw and you think you could add extra bits to it, but you can also just click here and expand, and every time I'm doing it, it's just increasing the size of the mask that's in there, and you can see it's giving me much better results with just a few expands. It's pushing that in. Obviously there's still a lot of bits sticking through from the mask that I drew before, that it wasn't perfect, makes life not so great. But what we can then do after this is we can actually just, once we're fairly happy with what we have, and our expanded areas, to remove as much as possible and get it looking so that we just have a few of the leaves sticking back in. So I'm still kind of expanding it out, and it's getting rid of a lot of those little leaves that were kind of poking through, and it's giving me fairly decent ground and everything. So once I'm happy, just click apply, and it will create a new layer with all of those changes in it. And then once we're in there, we're back into the main Photoshop screen, and there you can see that's all of the content aware fill. So that's what it's using to fill in all of those gaps, is that, and it just puts it as a layer on top of what was there before. So what I'm actually going to do is, in order to clean out all these bits of leaves and everything else, I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. And with this you can sample from any other layer, and then you can paint onto the active layer that you have. So select a layer and you paint onto a layer. You use command to select the sample, and then what it does is it uses that as a basis for it. In the end, you've got adjustments to the brush that you have. You can adjust the opacity of your brush, you can adjust the softness and everything else in order to just kind of give yourself a nice blend. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making, adjusting the size of the brush, making it a little bit bigger, and also making it a little bit hard but not too hard, just to give a nice edge to it. And as you can see there, I'm actually painting on the wrong layer, so I have the wrong layer selected. So you need to select the layer that you want to paint to, which in my case is the one with the new content aware fill in it, and there we are, start to paint on. So it's taking a sample from one, bringing it across. Now it's not perfect, it's not ideal, it's not lined up, but I'll try and get a better sample from up here, which obviously didn't sample anything because I had the wrong layer selected. So I go to my other layer and then select. So I'm switching between the layers and doing the things on it. So this is what I do, just switch between the layers, so select the sample and then paint out. I'm just going to try and paint out and blend in and just remove all of the leaves and little bits that are kind of just sticking out from things that are left behind. And you're just looking for kind of patterns within the clouds. You just kind of want to keep extending like sections and things like that, and just do blending in as best you can. Just get it looking kind of fairly decent. I mean, it's really more about the edges than it is about the center of it, because of the nature of what I'm going to do when I put the tree back on the top. A lot of the things in the middle are not going to have much effect. So once I'm happy with that, I'm just blending those layers together, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to save it out and just stop it from saving out as layers and everything else. And I'm just going to rename this and call it the background layer. And then we have our foreground layer, the trees. We just put the tree back on there, and you can see that's the tree. It's covering all those areas going over the top of it. Yeah, I know there's a few leaves missing also from the section before, but it's just quick and easy. And normally I'd go in and I'd adjust all the things behind the tree, all the sky that you can see through it. I'd extract those out from the actual tree layer itself, so that when I save it, it keeps the transparency between the leaves. But I'm just doing this kind of quick and easy, just in order to get to to get it done. So that has the different layers in it now. So this is my foreground layer that I'm going to be working with, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to export it as a PNG. Well, I do export as, and then it opens up the options so that you can actually go in and choose what you want to export it as, and I'm doing it as a PNG, portable network graphic, and transparency switched on, because that's important to bring the transparency through, and I'm just leaving it as its original size, its scale and everything. Just export this and save it wherever you want to save. So I'll put it on the desktop because that's where I was working with my other shots, and I'll just call it, you know, the tree FG for foreground. So tree and foreground. And that is exported, and then what I do is I just save the actual Photoshop file as well, which I probably should have done earlier before I do all the selection of things and everything else, but Photoshop's pretty stable, pretty decent to work with. So and here I'm going to go in and do the same again, do same as export as, so it's just with the background selected on its own, and you can leave transparency switched on or switched off because it is a solid element. You don't need to worry about the transparency, because it really is no transparency on the background, but I just leave it switched on, just, you know, for consistency, and so that if I'm ever running out any others, I'm not worried about forgetting that I've got that switched on. So once those are exported, that's it. I now have the two elements that I need in order to put together the kind of video that, you know, that I'm going to work. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start up Nuke, which is I'm using the non-commercial version, which, you know, allows you to do videos and things like that, and put things together for non-commercial purposes. And then I'm just going to read in the photos that I just saved, the two PNGs that I just saved to my desktop. Now what I'm going to do in this software is I'm going to set them up in a 3D space in order to, you know, put them together into a single video clip. So we have our foreground and our background PNGs, and you can see the foreground, it brings a lot of the elements through to it, where you've got these big white squares in it, but that's just because of the transparency settings. So if I actually pre-multiply this by the alpha, it extracts that alpha from it and shows you exactly what it is. There's the transparency, you can see through it. This is the background, it has the alpha in there, but if I pre-multiply it, it'll just be solid because there's no change to it. So I'm creating a scene, and this works, you know, I found this works best for setting up and lining up. So you have a scene and you create some cards, and what I'm actually going to do is just put the cards, put these photos onto cards of a set size and just set the position. If you put them together within the scene, you can makes it easier to see them on the screen at the same time, so you can, you know, see the relationship between them. So he's switched into 3D space, and I'm just pushing that background back. I've moved it -3 in Z, and I'm just increasing the size of it up, and I will play around with the size and distance later once I've got the camera in. So creating a camera, I'm connecting it into my scene, and I'm actually going to animate a move on the camera. So I'm going to see the camera is there in the camera settings at the top, and I'm just going to move the camera back and move it throughout the scene. So actually there we go, so push it back and set a keyframe, and that's on frame 0, and then I'm just going up to frame 100, and I'm just going to move it forwards. So you can see the camera move forward, so that means the camera's going to move forward within the scene. It's actually going to end back at the start point 0. So if I scroll back forwards, you can see the camera moving there. You can play it forwards and backwards depending what you want to do with your shot. So now what I need to do is move my foreground element and line that up. So I'm going to select that, and I'm actually going to just push it back a little bit. So you can see there's a difference between the background and the foreground. They are separated in 3D space, but they're just on 2 cards. And then in order to kind of line them up, get it worked out, and where I kind of want things to look what the right scale and everything should be, I actually go into the camera and I'm thinking, so I'm scaling up the card there, just getting an eyeball of how it is. But if I bring in a Scanline renderer, this is what we use to actually plug in the camera and plug in our scene, and when we look through that, that shows us what the camera's seeing, and we can see how it's going to look. And I'm putting a constant in, set at the resolution of the project that I'm working at, which I'm going to output in HD because that's a limitation of the software. The non-commercial software allows you to put out a HD size only. So the professional software allows you to do more, and if you get the indie version, which is if you're earning less than 100,000 per year from things, you can get a indie license, which I think is about £500 a year for the nuke software with the indie license, which is pretty good. And maybe once I start working, I'll be getting the indie license. At the moment, not working, not got any money coming in, so I'm just using the non-commercial version. But it's really good for learning the software and getting your head around it. So now all I'm doing is I'm adjusting the scale of the background, just trying to get it to fill the image. I adjusted the focal length of the camera there just to fit everything in, so that I don't need to adjust the animation, the actual movement of the camera. And I'm just lining things up so that they fill, and then they can actually, uniformly adjust it so that we don't lose any, we don't distort the image that we're working with. And I can just reposition it there in the shot a little bit, just to try and see how that looks. So this is our starting position, and I'm just playing through now, and it's rendering it and buffering it and putting it into the memory, so I get a bit of a playback and see how this is gonna come together. And it's just a straight push in, no not doing anything fancy, no kind of adjustments to the alignment or anything. It's just to start off with straight away, just gonna push straight in on it. And you can see when the leaves go in front of the background, obviously there's still bits of the background sky coming through because I didn't go in and finesse those edges, which I could do. I could go in and cut more of those edges out and everything else. But there you can see, when it plays back, you can see the difference in the two layers, and it adds that depth to the shot, very much like the old style 2D way that they used to do a lot of animation and things like that back in the days, where they'd do separate elements onto different layers and just animate them differently. this is kind of doing that, but in a 3D space. It's had like a fake 3D to the image, but it adds kind of a nice depth and a nice look to it, I think. You know, you could play forwards, play backwards, you could add text in, you could add elements in, whatever you need to do. You know, you can refine the edges, pull sections out from it, wherever you want to do. But that's just a kind of quick way of showing you how I kind of did the opening sequence of what I was working on. But yeah, if we go back to the start here, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to adjust the camera, select the camera, and I'm just going to rotate the camera so it's pointing down a little bit, so it's more kind of tracking in closer towards the horizon rather than just straight into the middle of the shot. Just to I just think it might make it look a little bit better. And I'm just bringing my position tree down and everything so it fills the whole of the space, and so have a play of that and see how that is just the camera tilted down ever so slightly. What it does, it should just bring the top part of the tree in a little bit closer than the background, to just add that extra kind of element of depth to it as well. And I could reposition where the camera's moving into. You could move the cards up and down and things like that to line the horizon up with the plane that you're on, however you want to do it. So you can almost go kind of under the tree. You could bring it all the way out so you're actually passing right through underneath the tree and showing the landscape behind. However you want to do it, but this is it's just showing you the depth and the separation that I managed to get through doing that content aware film, and I think it makes an interesting effect on it. So well, I hope you enjoyed. As I say, I could remove those things and finesse and everything else with it, but I just wanted to do something quick and easy and just get things done. So thank you for watching. I hope it's a technique that you might decide that you want to use, and I mean, the content aware fill you can use for anything, removing people from the background of shots and things like that if you don't want them there, or whatever you want to do and add elements to it. But thank you for watching. Hope you've learned something, and we will see you again soon, and maybe come back with some other tutorials in Photoshop or within Nuke.